Peace and blessings, family. This is your brother, asarimhotep with the Madhu Mandela Institute for the Advancement of Science and Culture. Today is Sunday, March the 21st, and we have a very special guest with us, Professor Ezrah Aharone. We'll be talking about sovereignty, business in Africa, linking the diaspora, and whatever we can get in the limited time that we have with the good professor. So all that and more when we return. Peace, 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 everyone. Thank you all for joining us, those of you who are joining us live, and of course, those of you who are joining the archives. Again, we have a very, very special guest with us today. Uh, we're going to talk about a lot in a short amount of time, and so there probably won't be a question and answer this time. Um, but hopefully, we'll have our guest back on in the future, and we can ask him some live questions. In the meantime, today at 5 o'clock, we're going to do a double header today. So today at 2 p.m., of course, we have Professor Aharone, and then at 5 p.m., we're going to have our good brother Ron Green, uh, businessman out of Philadelphia, and the whole What's Up African movement and tribe apparel worldwide. We're going to talk about, doing business as an African-centered person and, steps to make things grow, challenges, and the like, all of that and more. So that's going to be at 5 p.m. Eastern Time today. And as always, you can help support the channel by going to and joining our Patreon page at patreon.com/asarimhotep. And not only will you be helping the page, you'll be also helping to fund the documentary film that we're doing, Chiena Into, on the relationship between ancient Kemet and modern Central and West African cultures, languages, and kingdoms. So make sure that y'all, if y'all have not joined the Patreon page, to join our Patreon page. And there's a lot of perks and some nifty upcoming perks that you don't want to miss. So, and as always, make sure that you that's right, like the video and share the video. And if you are new to this channel, subscribe and make sure that you hit the bell so that you can get all of the alerts for when we do a live or I upload a pre-recorded video. So without further ado, I am going to introduce our guest today, Professor Ezrah Aharone, who is an author, public intellectual, and professor at Delaware State University, where he teaches global societies and is the conceptualizer and executive director of the Center for Global Africa, CGA. So the CGA is a systems approach think tank that collaborates with industry and government partners to connect the academics of historically Black colleges and universities to economies of Africa in ways that are solution-oriented, revenue-generating, and mutually beneficial. Aharone is a graduate of Hampton University with 39 years of geopolitical experience in African affairs, working as a strategist and subject matter expert to governments, business, and institutions. Being an original thinker, Aharone's books and syndicated columns apply the concept and consciousness of sovereignty as a universal lens to interpret the historiography and promote the self-authenticity and self-development of Africa, African Americans, and other diasporan Africans. He has published books including The Sovereign Psyche, Systems of Chattel Freedom versus Self-Authentic Freedom, which was released in 2016, Sovereign Evolution, Manifest Destiny from Civil Rights to Sovereign Rights in 2008, and Pawn Sovereignty, Sharpen Black Perspectives on Americanization, Africa, War, and Reparations, which was published in 2003. He is also a contributor to the university textbook Freedom on My Mind, A History of African Americans with Documents. So without further ado, I welcome to the program, to the Mbongi, Ezrah Aharone. How are you doing, sir?
My brother, Asar, how are you?
I am well. I am well. I am well. Thank you. Thank you.
Good to
It
be
is
back. Good to
yeah,
be
man.
back. Good to be black.
It is an honor to have you on the program, and I've been wanting to get you on for the longest. Your books is a required reading in my circle. And I still have to get your latest one though, the one that was released in 2016. So I'll be getting that real soon.
Okay.
But I have the other two, and I put that on par with Blueprint for Black Power, and other important works. Like they have to read those in conjunction. And I see you have it in the background, the Blueprint for Black Power,
Oh
as
yeah.
well. Yeah.
This
So
just just a small collection of some that I have here in this office, but yes.
yes, I understand. So I want people to know who you are and to know your works, to digest it, and to get involved in the many projects that you are involved in as well. And so, because this is the first time you're on this platform, uh, just introduce yourself. Tell us where you're from and how you got into what you're into now. What was that journey?
Oh, okay.
Uh,
I'm a brother born in Newark, New Jersey.
mhm,
Raised in the Jersey experience. I grew up in Passaic, New Jersey, and went to school at Hampton University in Virginia, and shortly thereafter arrived in Africa in the early 80s and uh, had great experiences that A led to B and so forth. And ultimately, I've spent most of my adult life living and working in West Africa. And in this latest incarnation, I now teach at Delaware State University, where I'm also the founding director and conceptualizer of the Center for Global Africa, as you mentioned in the intro. And that's a very important institutional uh, part of what I do because it's designed to work with HBCUs in general, historically Black colleges and university in general, to tap into the specialties of the universities and the expertise of professors and work alongside industry partners in the various fields of professions that we as African Americans are so gifted at, and tie those things into the economies in Africa in ways overall that are mutually beneficial, but revenue generating and certainly problem solving, which is something that expands the Black experience in a unique type of way, but as well strengthens here domestically the institutional presence and the collaborative nature of what we need to do as Africans in America to address 21st century problems. And HBCUs should be at the center of those types of engagements. So that's where I am now. And the Center for Global Africa is a great extension of my overall work in philosophy in terms of ideals and designs of uh, Pan-Africanism and uh, collaborative works that need to occur between Africa and the diaspora. I can't hear. I think maybe there's a sound.
There you go. I
Okay.
forgot. I try to mute myself just in case there's a, I'm breathing in the mic while you're talking. Um, you and I was saying thank you, for that. And you you've been back and forth between the states and in parts of West Africa. And what were you doing particularly, and how did those experiences shape the writings of the books that we read off earlier in terms of this, honing in on this concept of sovereignty and how we must orient and have that as the foundation, for the kinds of goals that we collectively, want for African people.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, thank you for that.
Hmm.
And of course, academically and in my pursuit of being an African in this world, it's important to understand that the concept of sovereignty, which I embraced as an academic specialty to study and understand in terms of that concept globally, universally, and then particularly as it relates to African people, inclusive of Africans in America. And it's interesting because uh, it's a concept that's so distant from everyday discourse of Africans in America, but yet it's so central to the dialogue of the world. And so I was always curious as to uh, why and how the self-application of this concept has been so alien to the Black experience. But it's not that it is alien in terms of the real understanding of the aspirations of it, and understanding of the attempts of sovereign practices throughout our history.
Hmm.
It's just something that's overlooked because uh, the modern day nation of Sierra Leone grew out of that experience. Thomas
Hmm.
Peters and other Africans who fought for the British during the American Revolutionary War were the actual pioneers of Africans who left America and went to Africa, and Sierra Leone became ultimately this modern day nation. The same with Liberia. Africans from here wanting to pursue ideals of self-governance, self-authenticity of political and ideological identity. Uh, Liberia became an expression of that. And then you have individuals like Martin Delany, who had grand ideals of sovereignty, who wrote about sovereignty in a very modern context. If you read Delany's writings and you dissect the way he uh, uses the concept and applies it, it's very modern. And
Hmm.
if my studies are correct, he is certainly amongst the first. He may be the first. I haven't seen anyone so clearly articulate the concept, from this African American experience in a way that he contextualized it, and so much so that one of the uh, pillars of the Center for Global Africa is anchored in the work of Delany. Really a lot of the unfinished work of Delany, who actually traveled to Africa and signed treaties with Yoruba leaders to resettle Africans from here uh, in the territory that we know of as Nigeria. So the history of it is very fascinating when you contextualize it through this lens, which is something that is often overlooked. So that's why I took up this specialty to examine this concept, as I said, in a universal context, in a global context, and from the particularities as it relates to this African American experience. And I think that it's important to understand too that when you're talking about this concept, at the highest level, of course, self-governance is what the practice of sovereignty would ultimately produce.
Mhm.
At the same time, more so than anything, sovereignty is a consciousness,
Mm.
because you can't produce any of the products and symbols of it unless you have the consciousness. So ultimately, what you see, whether it's a national anthem or uh, a full-fledged military, or uh, uh, say people who have staunch ideas of nationalism, all of these things come out of an awareness, a consciousness, a mindset. And within that, there are different levels in which that mindset is applied. So, from the African American experience, I like to look at it in the context of what is it now based on the realities that Africans in America face and Africans in general. How do we look at this concept in a modern way, in ways that benefit the end group or the practitioners of it, and how that then in ways fan out to benefit others and become part of, this, what you could call this engineering of nations and peoples and cultures, and the way we all fit in and
Mm.
play a contributing role.
It's interesting that you. Hold on, I'm getting a. Are you hearing an echo?
No,
Okay, why am I?
no, I'm not hearing any echo. On my end,
Let,
the sound is the
let
sound.
me let me do something here. Testing, testing. Okay, so when I ask a question, I'm going to pause your mic. Oh, now I don't hear the echo anymore. Okay, we'll go from there. Well, I was hearing the echo feedback, so something happened. I don't know what, but it's fixed now. So yeah, what I was saying is that it's interesting that you say that, because in terms of sovereignty being a mindset, and it's kind of hard to get Africans on the sovereign train, because in in my experience, most African Americans, for example, think that they're free, and that they don't have that they shouldn't be asking these sovereign questions. And I remember in your text, which is actually on the was my lower left side in your room, which is probably on the right hand side for you, which is the sovereign evolution text, manifest destiny from civil rights to sovereign rights. You talk about, for example, um, the Emancipation Proclamation, and how basically the United States pulled the trick and transferred ownership, from the private to the almost the state, basically, and they didn't have uh, there was no negotiations between African Americans in the state in the United States,
Mhm.
and how this hurt us, and how we should be thinking like that. Like, there should have been some terms, you know, uh, developed, and um, we should have had some leadership, who had, power in mind, and we should be power seeking in a sense, to help our own interest. And so I want to know if you can go into that a little bit, of what that doctrine, meant for us, and how this helped to keep us in this mindset that we're currently in now, to where we're depending on them for everything, or whatnot.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing, and this is universal again.
Yeah.
Any conflict ends with some type of an agreement.
Hmm.
Bilateral, trilateral, multilateral. Nations agree, people agree, and that process did not happen at the end of slavery in America. And so what I outlined was the unilateral nature of, what occurred. So in the case of the 13th Amendment and the Emancipation Proclamation, Africans weren't in need of further legislations from the U.S. government. What was necessary was some formal agreement that would be a workable document that would still be relevant today. And I would argue that a lot of what people now use the term structural racism, institutional racism, systemic racism, it dates back to this period of time when really, if the US was sincere or is sincere now, that period would be revisited in the modern instrumentalities, the modern way in which conflicts are resolved and people receive justice. We look at it through that lens because it's very complex today. And racism is not a surface issue. And everyone would tell you, well, these are deep rooted problems that date back to this period. Well, let's go back to that period. What went wrong? The idea of continuing as is and not addressing the specificities of what did or what did not occur is critically important because there has to be a starting point of what everyone is on the same page with. The democracy on paper is much different than democracy in practice. And you could use that all over the world. You can write anything on a paper. Yeah, I could write something on a piece of paper now and hold it up. But the practice of that is what's important. And so, you hear now people say abolish the 13th Amendment or alter the 13th Amendment. The question is, why was the 13th Amendment a brilliant idea at the time? What made it so much of an acceptable political way of thinking at that time? And maybe that thinking that went into that made it a good idea is something that needs to be examined. So by revisiting the original points in which what we know of today as the flaws in race relations, those periods, that period of time and those documents, it certainly would not hurt to intellectually, academically, politically revisit those things, and then have a different starting point about, well, even what is racism? Because America had a genuine opportunity. 1776, at the signing of the Declaration of Independence, 1787 with the Constitution, America had a chance to live up to its creed. Then Lincoln with the Emancipation Proclamation, and of course, anyone who studies that knows that it's a military document. It's not an instrument of freedom. Then the 13th Amendment. So these are things that absolutely we need to take a second look at, especially in today's climate. Because as racism is not a modern phenomenon that just simply needs some tweaking, in a few, pieces of new legislation. It's much deeper than that. And now that, people are more open to discussing racism, in all my work, I say, let's go back to the starting point. Let's look at Jefferson and what he really meant in how that those things have been misconstrued today to mean other things. And perhaps if we took a genuine look at these documents and the founders and the original thinking, we could be on the same page of beginning to address real racism. But I think that it's a big project to revisit that, because so much of what is accepted as norms in America and the greatness of America hinges to this period that in my work I say let's take another look at it.
Indeed. Um, and I know we got limited time, so I just want to ask briefly. We're throwing around this word sovereignty, but what would that look like in the most ideal sense for African people?
It,
You
it
know,
looks
go ahead.
it looks like institutions functioning in ways that the end use of what we know is applied in ways that benefit African people and solve African problems.
Hmm.
And,
There are,
and, and that in and of itself is the fundamental way in which that thinking or that concept is employed universally. When people use what they know, they establish institutions, and they work in terms of things that produce outcomes that solve their problems. And in fact, uh, Amos Wilson uh, once wrote or said that one measure of intelligence is the degree to which what you know solves problems. And to me, I've never moved far away from that square in anything that I think,
mm,
and so institutionally, we have to have functioning ways in which those institutions solve problems. And that's what it looks like. Problem
mm,
solving independently. You know,
mm,
African people making determinations that, where are, for instance, where are the new starting points to address racism? You,
mm,
you know, what is it that we know that we can point to that identifies? Is it people? Is it systems? Is it buildings? Is it the way legislation is passed? Is it an imbalance in Congress? What is it? It's
mm,
easy to say it exists, but what is it?
mm,
Where is it? Who's responsible for it?
mm,
Because disparities, have origins.
mm.
They don't exist in vacuums. So I think now that the there's a different level of being able to people saying they're interested in solving, race related problems. So the environment is different now. So I'm hoping that it would result in more concrete types of change.
I appreciate it. Now, do you believe in the viability and the probability of a United States of Africa? And if you do, in what ways would that be beneficial to the continent of Africa? And what are some of the challenges?
But well, just colonialism uh, created not just a disintegration of cultures and people and the sovereignties that existed during those periods of time. The ramifications of colonialism, are deep. They run deep, and it's a complex question. But let me say this: that We're dealing with Africa as is, and certainly, you can be diverse and still be strong as nations. Europeans, if you look at Europe geographically, it's Western Europe is far less than 10% of the world's geography. So follow me. Minute, small, fractional part of the Earth's geography. Yet Europe has at least 50 nations. Western Europe, at least 50. There are only 193 nations that are member states of the UN. So in that small geography, you have over like 25%, of the world's nations. So they, you could, and they're small. Some of them have less than 1 million people. So they show a model that, well, you can be diverse, you can be small in number, but yet in a collaborative way, you can be strong. So I look at that and look at Africa with 55 states and far more geography. So the idea of a United States of Africa, I think the first step is a unified Africa in whatever ways in organizing that will look like. Now you have regional cooperation in Africa. The different regions cooperate. Then you have the recent trade agreements in Africa, the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement that's taken place. So all of these instruments are important, that can lead towards the ideal that you just outlined, the United States of Africa. But I think the cooperation is what's important. And, Africa has 5 geographical regions: Northeast, Southwest, and Central. But then in addition to that, the African Union has designated Africans who are in the diaspora as the 6th region. And that 6th region is not territorial, it's not geographic, but it's ancestral. And the African Union is encouraging Africans in the diaspora, including African Americans, to contribute to this new consciousness and awareness of Africa, whereby there's an initiative called Agenda 2063, which is Africa's 50-year development plan, created in 2013. And Agenda 2063 has 7 aspirations of development and goals that is very important for us to, in the diaspora, to be aware of, because there are key roles that we can play in that process leading towards, as you said, this United States of Africa or Unified Africa, however you want to describe it. And that's why, as you read earlier in my bio, and as the Center for Global Africa promotes, we are a 6-region institution working with the African Union to help facilitate those ideals, which I would argue in so many ways, when we see it, is mutually beneficial, because people oftentimes see Africa as someplace else or something else, or why should we be concerned about Africa? We have issues here, when it's one experience, and Africa doesn't represent something else. Africa represents a tentacle of the Black experience that has always been tethered to this African American experience. It's just a part of our world history. A lot of times people say, oh, African American history is American history, like as though that's the qualifier. And I said, no. African American history is world history. To say that it's American history is like saying a child is older than its mother. We we supersede the American experience. Just like Europeans who came here, they supersede the experience in that context as well. So in moving towards that, United Africa or United States of Africa, you know, it's a process. But when we're dealing with what we have now, we can see see that we have to apply things in certain ways that everyone has this valuable part to play.
I appreciate that. And lastly, and I know we got a little less than 5 minutes, um, for the Center uh, for Global Africa, you have this mechanism called African Peer Review Mechanism, the APRM. Can you explain that just a little bit more, and what is all involved that in the overall goal and purpose of this particular type of peer review that you speak of?
Okay, great. And that relates to the former question when you
Hmm.
spoke about the United States of Africa. Uh, African Peer Review Mechanism, or APRM, and I'm hoping that everyone in the listening audience now will take a key note to this, because African Peer Review Mechanism is very important. It's an agency of the African Union that evaluates governance and the socioeconomic performance of nations. And that is done with the view to make recommendations that governments implement in terms of moving towards Agenda 2063, as I just mentioned to you, the 50-year blueprint for African development. And so the Center for Global Africa, we have a partnership with the African Peer Review to assist them in capacity building and to assist them in helping to deepen that review process. And in that context, working with the other HBCUs and Black professionals and experts, we are combining and collaborating with various groups and HBCUs to do just that, to work with APRM in order to not just help in facilitating the processes of APRM, but to also look at these pre-identified ways in which we as the diaspora can play a very specific contributing role in African development. And so when you look at the vast reservoir of resources and intellectual capital, as well as economic capital, that we have as African Americans, there are a lot of the unmet needs of Africa that we can begin to tie and connect ourselves into Africa through Agenda 2063 in very meaningful and in unique ways that I would argue are very necessary to once again expand the Black experience in these unique ways that are going to be mutually beneficial. So the Center for Global Africa is not just an academic agency, that looks to expand experiential learning or looks to create intern projects or to have study abroad programs. It's about how we collectively begin to apply the end use of the great work that's being done at HBCUs and connect them to the economies in Africa in very measurable ways. Because Africa represents a frontier for a lot of groups and nations, in a sense that it's colonialism 2.0 or exploitation 3.0, and so as Africans in America, as part of the diaspora, the African Union has thrown out a lifeline to us to say, hey, let's cooperate, let's work together. And the Center for Global Africa is designed to be this convening point and a point of collaboration that we can be the gravitational force to orchestrate this necessary two-way channel of engagements that are necessary to bring about 21st productivity for ourselves in the diaspora as well as Africa. So APRM, or African Peer Review Mechanism, is a very important and strategic agency of the African Union that we all need to become familiar with. And as well, when you think APRM, you think Center for Global Africa, because we are the counterpart here in the diaspora to facilitate this mission and mandate of APRM. And as I said, that mission is very important in terms of evaluating governance, making recommendations, and then most importantly, governments implementing those recommendations to bring about or to create what Agenda 2063 defines as or identifies as the Africa we want. And the Africa we want is a fully productive Africa that's prosperous, that's integrated, that's moving towards unity in ways that we have only talked about in the past, but now, through the modern means of technologies and modern institutions that function at high levels, we can create this new paradigm, as we call it, the Africa we want. So that's APRM. It's very important, and we're really proud of that, the partnership with APRM, because it gives us a means by which to involve the diaspora in African development in very unique ways.
Thank you for that greatly, and thank you for your time and your insights. We'll definitely have to bring you back on in the future, so we can kind of hone in on probably a specific topic and get some more details. But I really wanted to introduce you to my audience, and to have my audience understand, uh, the psyche behind the works that you have produced, and I highly, highly recommend them. They're on my quote unquote coming into consciousness book reading list, which I'll probably share on at the bottom as well in the description. Some texts that I think are mandatory for those coming into knowledge of themselves and wanting to know in what ways they could contribute, to the liberation, the sovereignty of African people, and even within your family, if that's your limitation. So with that being said, I thank you once again, Professor Aharone, for joining the Mbongi today, and it is a great honor to have you here. And make sure everyone that is listening live that you like and share the video. And matter of fact, I want everyone to go to his website.
And if I could say,
Go ahead.
Yeah, my website, EzraSpeaks.com, but also go to the Center for Global Africa website. And when you log on, you get an option that you can download Delaney's book that he wrote when he came back from West Africa in 1849. He wrote this great overview of Africa, and you'll see a link that you can click and you download that book where I wrote a modern introduction to it to give that text, a place in modern history to show, even in terms of like with APRM, African Peer Review Mechanism. I argue that Delaney wrote the first peer review
Hmm.
The first overview of Africa, its resources, the possibilities of working with African Americans and what that would look like. So you'll
Hmm.
see a download of that particular book, report
Uh,
on the Niger Valley Exploring Committee.
yeah, so it's going to be a pop up that comes up
Yes.
and
Yeah.
into your email, and you get the download.
Yeah.
And Martin Delaney is a very important figure, and so much so that he, uh, I, you know, we're starting an institute because I deal scholastically at least with Egyptology and language and Bantu culture and historical studies, and so we've created an entity. You can't really see it now. Maybe you can see it if it's no, I guess not. But it's the Martin Delaney Center for Egyptology.
Okay.
And for those who know, Martin Delaney was, to my knowledge, the first African American to be able to read to some degree the ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs. But he was also, he created several different publishing entities and whatnot. Of course, he was in the military and then, saying a nurse. He was just very, for lack of a better term, Renaissance man, or I should say, an Imhotepian man
Okay.
of, saying the modern times. So, uh, with that in mind and the need for an African American center of Egyptology and now river studies, we created this institute and we named it after Brother Martin Delaney.
Yeah.
But he's a very, very important figure. Um, and like everybody needs to read his works. And I
Yes.
was sharing your page here so that they can get your books directly from your page. So
Yes.
the pawn sovereignty, the
Sovereign
what is
evolution.
yeah, the sovereign evolution and the sovereign psyche, text. You can get them all on israspeaks.com. So make sure y'all support our good brother and get and read those texts and give them as a gift, saying to some friends and family and spread the word about his research and, of course, the Center for Global Africa.com, which you mentioned earlier.
Yes.
So, with that said, I want to thank you once again. And if you have any last words, I'll give you the floor.
Yeah. Thank you. And I was on your show before.
Uh-huh.
Um, it wasn't that long ago, but now we're using this new platform.
Yes,
Right.
it was on
So,
the Blog Talk Radio days. So yeah,
okay.
this is just a different medium. So yeah, that was a while ago. Yeah,
Right.
the Blog Talk Radio program. Well, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Right. So, but things have evolved, and so now we're
Hmm.
using this platform.
Hmm.
Right. So the world is changing, and, and those changes are you can look at them as being some type of sovereign evolution of some bodies or some groups, because we're seeing development, we're seeing progress, we're seeing problems being solved. We're seeing technology become this new engine where innovation and ideas are translated, and ideas and innovations are currencies.
Hmm.
And so we have to be now at the forefront of those very things that allow us to make these contributions,
Hmm.
because otherwise technology will become an albatross that we once again fall behind the eight ball in terms of development. So we have to be very cautious about the way we contribute, so that we become pioneers alongside everyone else, who are people who are creating these great things that are transforming the world. So
Hmm.
we have to continue to become transformers in these new and unique ways, to apply what we know in this globalized world, to move everything forward. So
Mhm.
I use the example of how your show has evolved. So tomorrow, who knows what it will be like. What platforms we'll be using, and what that will look like in Africa, and how we can you know take these very same things and the outgrowth of them to make better the ideas and the strategies of Agenda 2063. So you know there are structures, new structures being put in place, that are important for us to keep a pace with. And I think that, as you mentioned, I go back to your question about the United States of Africa, you know, and the African Union making us the sixth region. These are very important pieces to the puzzle, that are going to, in a 21st century way, give us a new sense of relevance and importance and contribution. So with the Center for Global Africa, I'm real excited about that and working with Africa. And, I hope that, well, not hope, but the next time we talk, we can speak more definitively about what we can do together.
All right. And with that said, I wish everyone a good day, and don't forget that we'll be back on on today at 5 p.m. with our good brother Ron Green, and so y'all don't want to miss that interview. And for those who have to leave for some reason and come back for the archives, be safe out there. Continue to wear your mask. I don't know how y'all feel about shots, but those who have no problem with it, continue to get your shots, and let's be safe out there because we got work to do. And with that said, we are out.